Hi, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us for a self-directed IRA Tuesday. My name is Zach Wilson. I'm one of the IRA specialists here at Quest Trust Company. So before we get started, got to give you the disclaimer. Keep in mind that everything you're about to see here is for your educational purposes only. Right? When you're working with Quest, it's important to understand the role that we'll play when it comes to your retirement investing. We're here to facilitate as many transactions, really whatever type of transaction you'd be looking to make, as well as give you as many resources and as much education as we possibly can. But with that being said, Quest does not offer any sort of tax, legal, or investment advice, nor do we endorse any particular investment. So due diligence is always key. A little bit about us, for those of you who don't know us, we are Quest Trust Company. We're the largest self-directed IRA custodian in the state of Texas. We have roughly 20,000 active investor clients all across the country. We operate in all 50 states, plus 7 foreign countries. We hold currently $2.7 billion in assets under administration. We have over 100 employees, 34 of which are certified IRA service professionals. That means whenever you give us a call, you're going to get a Quest employee who's there to answer just about any question you could have. Now, if you want to take a deeper dive to the real nuanced topics, we have 34 IRA service professionals on staff to take that dive with you. And as it stands right now, we have over $400 million in undirected cash sitting in our clients' accounts. Now, that pool of funds represents opportunity, right? Whether you're a current Quest client who's looking to invest their funds, or you're an investor who needs funds to make your deal happen, this is where your opportunity is going to lie. Now, before you get started in any investment at all, what's always the first step is to educate yourself. So guys, take advantage of the resources that we have. Check out our YouTube channel. Check out the Education Center on our website. Really look and dive into the investments you're wanting to pursue. We have hundreds of videos going over everything from the basics of a self-directed IRA all the way to the ins and outs of a syndication and what implications that can have within your IRA. So please utilize us as a resource. Now, once you've figured out what type of investment you're looking to pursue and you've decided this is where I want to go, well, the deal's not just going to make itself happen, right? So now you've got to network. You've got to build that network for your investments. Take advantage of the Tuesday classes like you're doing today, the Saturday classes, right, that we have every single week. Also, check out a virtual networking happy hour that's going to be on the fourth Wednesday of every month that is strictly dedicated to networking and allowing our clients to introduce themselves to other clients. But by far our most popular social is going to be the SDIRAS social on the first, second, and third Tuesday of every month in Houston, Austin, and Dallas, respectively. Now, the way these work is you get about 30 minutes to come, meet everybody, network, and say hi. After that, we're going to have a speaker come out and present for roughly 45 minutes to an hour on a variety of topics. All right, after that, you can go back to networking, and we're even allowing for deal pitching now. So if you have a deal, or even if you just have funds that you're looking to lend out, come check us out and get the word out so that you can make your investment happen. Also, coming up is our QuestCon. It's going to be December 9th through 10th. I'm really excited about this one. The Quest Expo was an awesome experience. What QuestCon is going to be is right now we're going to take a look backwards at the market, right? We're going to take a look at a recap of 2021 in the real estate market and how it behaved then. And also, we're going to project forward. So we're going to have panels going over what they see, what their forecasts are for what the real estate market's going to look like coming up in 2023. So if you're interested in that, give us a call. Ask to speak to an IRA specialist, someone on our marketing team. We'd be happy to set you up with a ticket. So guys, today I wanted to get back to basics. Right? I want to take a step back because we like to dive into all different types of investments, what the entity structure could look like. We're covering a wide range of things. But every so often, it helps to get back to basics and go over what it looks like to build tax-free retirement. All right, so let's take a look at what tax-free real estate investing can look like within your IRA. Before we start, a little bit about me. I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. I started off at LSU as a chemical engineer. After a couple of years, I just felt like it wasn't really what I wanted to do. All right, so with that, I took a couple of years off and went over to U of H, where I finished up with a degree in finance. All right. After I got out, I was looking for where to plant my feet, how to get a foot in the door. And that's when I found Quest Trust Company. Now, when I started Quest, I didn't really know much about IRAs. All right. So going through the training that Quest offers, all right, we do a 3-month training. It really let me buy in. All right. When I started off at Quest, I was in our auditing back-end team. So what that allowed me to do was get a really good knowledge of how these investments are structured, right? I saw these contracts, I saw these deeds drawn up. And so I learned how these investments are structured on the back end. After that, I got a chance to join our IRA specialist team. So now I'm on the front end. Right? I'm seeing the conversation between syndicator and investor, between lender and borrower. So now I'm getting a well-rounded picture of what the overall investment process looks like. So speaking of these investments, it's important to establish how the IRS views every single type of entity in the United States. All right, they're going to fall under one of two categories. The first one is going to be your taxable entities. And obviously, if that's the first category, the second one's going to be your non-taxable entities. So at the very top of the list of taxable entities is you and anything that you establish, which makes sense when you think about it, right? You go to work, you earn income, whether it's W-2, 1099, Schedule C. Well, you're taxed on that income as you earn it. Right now, let's say you start doing some side investments, and so you want to set up an entity, right, for a little bit of asset protection. So you establish an LLC. Well, that LLC is also going to be a taxable entity. Now, let's take a step further. Let's say you start a business, right? And you file as an S Corp or a C Corp. Well, that's also going to be a taxable entity, either taxed as the entity itself or passed through to the owners of that entity. This even extends to trusts, things like land trusts, personal property trusts. Those are also going to be considered taxable entities. Now, when I say non-taxable entities, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably a church, a nonprofit organization, a charity. All right, well, did you know that your self-directed IRA is going to fall under that non-taxable entity side? It also includes all of those qualified retirement plans. So the 401ks, the 403bs, the TSPs, right? This is going to fall under this non-taxable category. This even extends to the solo 401k, which can be self-directed just like an IRA. But really, what is that term self-direction? What does it mean to have a self-directed account? Well, it's really just a marketing term. That term self-directed is just to illustrate that you're the one in the driver's seat. You have full control over the investments that are being made within your retirement account. There's no legal distinction between your self-directed IRA here at Quest versus an IRA at another custodian like a TD Ameritrade, a Charles Schwab, a Fidelity. The only difference is the custodian themselves. They allowed you to take those funds, your retirement funds, and put them into publicly traded assets. Whereas custodians like Quest, we allow you to take those same retirement funds, except invest them into privately held assets. Specifically, real estate style investments is what we specialize in. All right, so now that we know that self-direction is just a marketing term, well, what accounts can be self-directed? Here at Quest, we hold 7 different types of accounts that fall under 3 different categories. The first one is going to be your personal accounts. Now, these are the accounts that you've heard of for sure, right? This is the traditional and the Roth IRA. Now, by far the most common account that we see here at Quest, and I'm sure even in the US at all, is going to be the traditional IRA. Now, that's not to say because it's better than the Roth IRA, right? I don't think that's the way you should think about them. Each one is going to have its own specific role. But the reason the traditional IRA is the most popular is because of its pre-tax status. All right, whenever you're moving funds over from that qualified retirement account, well, usually when on that movement of funds, you're looking to avoid any sort of tax burden, right? Any sort of tax obligation that can be associated with that movement. So unless you specify otherwise, all the contributions you've been making to that qualified retirement plan have been made as pre-tax contributions. If that's the case, moving the funds over to an account that matches that pre-tax status, like that traditional IRA, is what helps to avoid any sort of taxation on that movement of funds. That's why the traditional IRA houses most of our retirement accounts, because it has that pre-tax status. Now, once the funds are in there, they're growing tax deferred. And then down the line, when you've reached retirement age, 59 and a half, you get to take those distributions out as taxable income. Now, on the flip side of that is my personal favorite account, the Roth IRA. Where the traditional IRA had the pre-tax status, the Roth IRA has the post-tax status. This gives it 2 distinct advantages. The first is that any contributions made, because they're post-tax, the IRS has already gotten its slice of the pie. It no longer cares what you do with that money. This means that you can take out contributions, right? Contributions within the Roth IRA can be taken out tax and penalty free at any time. You do not have to wait till retirement age. The second advantage is that because this is a post-tax account, the funds in there are not growing tax deferred, they're growing tax free. So let's say over the next 5 years, you max out your contributions to the Roth IRA. So each year, over the next 5 years, that's $6,000 a year. At the end of year 5, you have $30,000. Well, over the life of the account, you make additional contributions, you make some more investments, you build that from $30,000 to $100,000 to $500,000 to $1 million. Well, all of that growth, as long as you've had a Roth account open for 5 years and are over the age of 59 and a half, all of that growth comes out tax and penalty free to you. That means Uncle Sam doesn't get to touch a dime of the money that you've earned within your Roth IRA. Now, the next category of accounts is going to be our employer accounts. I'm not going to spend too much time going over these. Just know that these are meant for self-employed individuals who are looking to take advantage of the higher contribution limits that are associated with these accounts. This is going to include the SEP, the Simple, and the Solo 401k. The SEP usually designed for people who are self-employed with very little, if any, employees. The Simple, usually for a little bit of a larger firm, anywhere from 4 to 5 people, but again, you can customize it however you want to. And then the Solo 401k is its own beast, right? It's a very powerful account, but it can be a very a burdensome account, right? There could be a lot of work that goes in that Solo 401k. Finally, third category is going to be our specialty plans. This includes the Coverdell ESA and the HSA. That's the Education Savings Account and the Health Savings Account. Know that these accounts are not retirement accounts. That's one thing that separates them from the rest of the accounts here at Quest. These are designed to help you today, not come retirement. So with the Coverdell ESA, you can set up one account for each child and contribute up to $2,000 a year per child. Now, keep in mind, both of these accounts can be self-directed and partnered with your other accounts here at Quest to help them grow a little bit faster and have access to deals that otherwise wouldn't have access to. With the ESA, the funds are going in there post-tax, right? But as long as they're coming out, going towards qualified education expenses, they're coming out tax and penalty free. Now, this can be things like tuition, school supplies. During COVID, because online learning was such a necessity, people were using their ESA to pay for laptops, to pay for iPads, to pay for the the internet bill. Right now, obviously, times have changed, but it just goes to show you what things that the ESA can be used for. Also, there's the HSA. I think personally, it's an underrated account that's very powerful. We call it at Quest, we call it the best of both worlds. The reason is because any contributions made to the HSA have the chance to be tax deductible. And when you pull the funds out, no matter what age, as long as they are going towards a qualified medical expense, they're coming out tax and penalty free. That means no taxation is touching that money at all. Right? This is the only account that has that feature. And I know you're thinking, oh, qualified medical expense. I'm sure it's a tiny little list of what it counts. It's actually the exact opposite. This is one of the few times where the IRS has sided with you and given you just a long list of what you can spend it on. As a matter of fact, the list that you can't spend it on is shorter than the list that you can. This goes for dental, vision, prescription drugs, over-the-counter drugs, co-pays. It can really be used for any number of medical expenses just to help alleviate some of the stress that comes with having those medical expenses. So now that we know what types of accounts can be self-directed, well, let's look at the why. Why should we self-direct an IRA? So there's a bunch of benefits that go along with self-directing an IRA, but we'd like to focus on 3. The first one is going to be true diversification. If you talk to your financial advisor right now, he tells you, okay, let's diversify your portfolio. Okay. Let's get you in some low yield, low risk mutual funds. Maybe we'll buy a couple of key stocks that we really want to hold on to, those big blue chip stocks. And then we'll purchase some bonds, right, to really spread out. Well, as long as you're in the public sphere, you're kind of just putting your eggs in different parts of what is overall the same basket. With a self-directed IRA at a custodian like Quest, we allow for that true diversification, that arm's length distance away from a public market that you have absolutely no control over. Right? This allows you to invest into privately held assets that are shielded from the ups and downs of a very, very uneasy market right now. The second benefit is going to be the tax savings. So if you're a real estate investor, then you know anytime you get your return on investment, you really have two options. The first one, you take the tax hit on that investment and you move on and reinvest what you have left. Or you get the return and put that into a 1031 exchange to try and defer the taxes for as long as you can. But when you do that, there's a couple of restrictions in that 1031, mainly the type of investment it can go towards, the value of that investment, and the timeline under which you have to have that next investment lined up. With an IRA, with a self-directed IRA, it negates the need for that 1031 at all, right? Because the funds are coming in tax deferred and in some cases completely tax free, you have that full return to be able to reinvest on your next investment with no restriction as to the timeline, the value, the type, anything like that. You no longer are restricted by those rules surrounding that 1031, and you still get the tax advantages of that 1031. Third category is going to be investing in what you know best. Now, most Americans, whenever it comes to their retirement funds, most have some sort of savings like a 401k, 403b, TSP. Sure. But if I had to ask, could you tell me exactly what those are invested in? What companies and what factors are determining the value of your retirement account? That account that's going to give you your quality of life come retirement age. Probably couldn't tell me, right? So with that pool of funds being so important, if not the most important pool of funds that you have, why wouldn't you want to use the knowledge that you've gained over your years as either a veteran real estate investor or as someone who's just getting to lay that foundation of real estate knowledge? Why wouldn't you want to leverage the knowledge that you have to build the future that you deserve, right? Now, the IRS isn't going to give you all of these advantages without putting some restrictions on the IRA. So let's take a look at what those restrictions are so that we can understand them properly and know how to navigate the self-directed IRA field. First one is going to be the people restrictions. This is going to be who you can and cannot commingle your funds with. Second one is going to be the transaction restrictions. This is what you can and cannot do with those people. And then the third are going to be your investment restrictions. This is what's going to dictate what you can and cannot invest with a self-directed IRA. Thankfully, the IRS has given us a very simple and easy to read chart that explains all of this. It's the IRS, guys. They're never going to do anything simple, but good news is that here at Quest, we've broken it down to a pretty palatable form. So the first one, at the very top of the list of those people restrictions, otherwise known as disqualified parties, is you yourself. Now, at first, this might seem weird, right? Well, it's my retirement money. Why am I prohibited? Well, that's because of what the account is designed to do. It's designed to benefit you come retirement age. It is not designed for you to benefit now. Because of that, the IRS does not want you and your IRA on opposite sides of the transaction. If you notice, we have that line right down the middle. That's the transaction. All right, you can never be on opposite sides of that line. Also, on this list of prohibited parties is going to be you, your spouse, your lineal ascendants, so children, grandchildren, your lineal descendants. Your lineal ascendants, so parents, grandparents, your lineal descendants, so children, grandchildren, their spouses, or any companies that those people own, control, manage, or are highly compensated by. All right. Best way to remember it is just like when you're on a flight and the flight attendant's telling you where the exits are, two in the front, some in the middle, down the back, same way. You, your spouse, lineal ascendants, lineal descendants, and really any companies that they're affiliated with. So now that we know that we cannot commingle with them, what can't we do with them? Well, that's where prohibited transactions come into play. So prohibited transactions are going to be that you cannot buy, sell, trade, loan, extend a service to, or receive a benefit from the IRA, whether direct or indirect. Now, what does this mean? Well, if my IRA purchases a property, right, I can't then sell it to myself, because what would prevent me from just simply selling it at a discounted price? It means I purchased a home for pennies on the dollar that I now get to live into. That's a benefit that you receive directly from your IRA that was not designed to benefit you now. This also goes to loaning, right? You cannot trade. That means you can't just quit claim deed the property from yourself or from your IRA to yourself and vice versa, right? Again, just overall, you cannot be on opposite sides of that transaction line. As far as the investment restrictions, guys, I really didn't even include a slide for it because it can be summed up in just two categories, two restrictions on what you can and cannot invest in. The first one, collectibles. So things like vintage art, vintage cars, alcohol, things that it's hard to get a true appraisal on, and that appraisal can be somewhat subjective. The other is going to be life insurance policies, because believe it or not, we do not want you investing or betting on someone else's life. So now that we know what we can't do with an IRA, well, what can we do? Really, guys, just about any type of investment that you would want to make personally. All right, you want to do fix and flips, or maybe you want to purchase single family homes for rental properties. By all means, you can do so and hold them within your IRA. You want to purchase some tax lien sales. You want to go into condos. You want to do options. You can all do that within an IRA. Let's say I don't want to deal really with real estate directly, so I want to give my money to someone else who knows what they're doing. Awesome. You can invest into a private entity. This is going to be things like startup companies or even syndications for multifamily or even land syndications. All of that can be done within your self-directed IRA. The third category is going to be lending out of that IRA. So let's say you don't want to deal with subscribing to an entity that you don't know much about, or you don't want to deal with actually owning that property personally within your or owning that property outright in your IRA. Well, now you get to be the bank. All right, you get to work with your lender and set the terms of that note. So you determine the interest rates, you determine the maturity dates, you're determining if it's going to be a balloon note or if it's being amortized. All of that is up to you because you have full control of the investments within your self-directed IRA. All that and much more. Even to mention, new to Quest is crypto investments. So we're going to be further expanding on that, what you can and cannot, what types of cryptocurrencies you can and cannot buy within your IRA. So now that you know what type of investment you want to go with, well, how do you get the money there? How do you fund your IRA? There are really three different ways to fund an IRA. The first one is going to be direct contributions to the account. This is money coming from your checking or savings account, from your pocket, going into the IRA. Now, the amount you're able to contribute on a yearly basis is going to entirely depend on the type of account that you've opened. Traditional and Roth IRAs, $6,000 a year between them, unless you're over the age of 50, and that gets bumped up to $7,000. But things like the SEP, the Simple, and the Solo 401k, that can be upwards of $61,000 within a year. Now, obviously, there are some things to be aware of, but just know that it's possible. And then for the specialty accounts like the ESA and the HSA, that ESA is $2,000 a year per child or per year per child. And then the HSA is going to depend on if it's just you being covered or if it's you and a spouse or you and children. It's going to either be $3,650 a year or $7,300 a year. All right. So the next way is to move funds over from my current IRA. You can transfer the funds. Now, if it's at an IRA, as long as it's going from one IRA to another, this is just a trustee to trustee transfer. One of the benefits of doing this is that the receiving custodian is actually going to be the one who initiates the transfer of funds on your behalf. So like at Quest, all you need to do is fill out a transfer form, send it over to us, and then we'll initiate that from your current custodian. Now, because it's going from IRA to IRA, trustee to trustee, it's not reported to the IRS, which means no tax forms are generated on that movement of funds. And the final way, and probably the most common, is going to be a rollover from an old IRA, our old qualified retirement plan. Now, why do we stress old, right? because generally speaking, you're going to want to have what's called a separation of service from that employer before moving the funds over. This means you transferred, quit, fired, whatever it is, you're just no longer working for them. Now, can you move over funds from a current qualified retirement plan? Maybe. You could, it's possible, but you're going to want to ask a couple of questions. Whenever you contact that administrator, you want to ask them if they allow for what's called in-service withdrawals, otherwise known as in-service rollovers. Some say yes, some say no. It's going to be dependent upon every individual qualified retirement plan. Now, even if they do, right? Let's say they do. Awesome. Next question is how old? Some will allow it, no matter your age. Some will want you to wait until you're over the age of 59 and a half. So you want to ask, but generally speaking, it's always a little bit harder. So moving from an old qualified retirement plan is going to be ideal. Now the funds are there. How do you fund your investment? Well, at Quest, we make it very simple. First thing to do is to give us a call. Let us know you're ready to make an investment within your IRA. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to assign a processor to you that's going to specialize in whatever type of investment you're looking to make. All right. Now that processor is going to work with you as well as any title company, any syndicator, any borrower, whoever it is, to help you gather up all the documentation at which time we'll audit to be sure everything's in compliance and that everything's vested correctly in the name of the IRA. From there, once we've got all the documents in, what we'll do is we'll send them out. We'll send the funds out in 24 to 48 hours. So let's take a look at some real case studies. What does it look like to make this investment within an IRA from an overall big picture standpoint? Today, we're going to be talking about John Wood and Jay Wright. Now, both of them have SEP IRAs with Quest, and they wanted to purchase a property that was valued at $250,000. So the first step was that they each transferred over $150,000 from their current SEP over to a SEP here at Quest. Now, why 150 each? Well, because they wanted to be sure that each of them had enough money to cover any expenses that were associated with this property. That's covering insurance payments. That's covering any rehab that needs to be done, as they intended to have some rehab done for this property. So what they do, they make an offer to purchase the condo in the names of the SEP IRA. At this point, it's important to understand that it is not the IRA, or it's not you or John and Jay taking out funds, purchasing the property, and then putting the funds back into the IRA. That's not what's happening. This is John and Jay's SEP IRAs as their own entities, partnering and purchasing the property under the names of those entities, which is always going to be Quest Trust Company, FBO, client name, IRA, client account number. All right. They complete the necessary forms, so buy direction letter, direction of investment, and they sign everything read and approved for it to be sent back over here to Quest. Now, once it's back at Quest, what we're going to do is we're going to look it over, and we're going to sign the contract and send it over to the title company, along with the earnest deposit of $10,000, $5,000 from each, because they're splitting it 50-50. So that means 50 cents of every dollar comes out of Jay's, 50 cents of every dollar comes out of John's. All right. After that, at closing, John and Jay review and approve all closing documents, and the title company sends those documents back to Quest for signatures. Because remember, while we're never going to do anything without your written approval, right? Without that read and approved signature, at the end of the day, we are the custodian over the account. So we have to have the final authorizing signature on any investment documents. So Quest signs closing documents and wires the funds from the SEP IRAs to the title company for closing, at which point the title company records the deeds, and then the two IRAs are now the owners as follows. So Quest Trust Company, FBO, John Wood, SEP IRA, account number 1234531, as to an undivided 50% interest. Now it's going to repeat that format on both of them. And that last section is what's going to dictate the percentage ownership. It can't just list both IRAs without telling you how much owns each percentage, right? Because then how would you know how to split the funds? So we need that little bit, that last part of the vesting, to show the percentage ownership. All right, so they now have the property in the SEP IRAs, and so they go about hiring a management company. The property management company finds a tenant to lease the unit, Rents and expenses are handled by that property manager, not by John and Jay. All right. Now, does that have to be the case? No, that does not have to be the case. But in this case, they decided to go with a property manager. The office condo has a positive monthly cash flow of $850, $425 for each SEP, which is tax deferred because of the structure of the SEP IRA. Now, I know what you might be thinking, right? That seems pretty low, right? That seems fairly low for a property being owned in the IRA. Well, there's a reason. It's because upon negotiating with the tenant after John and Jay spoke with them, the tenant agreed to pay a lower rent, but in exchange, they would handle all of the construction and rehab that needed to be done for the building. So the way John and Jay saw it is that, well, I'm still getting a positive cash flow and I don't have to spend the extra money to rehab the property. It sounds like a good deal to me. So the property management company submits a new rent proceeds to Quest for the benefit of John and Jay's SEP IRA. So the funds are not going to John and Jay themselves, right? It's imperative that they come directly to the SEP, because we need it to go directly back to the IRA and not to John and Jay personally. So John and Jay track their investments via the client portal, which you can set up as soon as you have your account established here at Quest. Now, down the road, 2 years later, the sales contract's prepared for $395,000. That's because that tenant's now wanting to purchase that property outright from them. It decides, well, I don't want to do all this rehab and I'm now paying rent, so I'm not really getting a return on my investment. So they decide that they want to submit an offer for $395,000 to purchase that property. So sales contracts were prepared and submitted to Quest for signatures. Now, after having been signed, read, and approved by John and Jay, as well as both complete a Quest sell direction letter. Like I said, we need the read and approved signatures, but at the end of the day, it always needs to be Quest who's doing the signing. On the day of closing, John and Jay review and approve all closing documents. Quest signs the documents and returns them to the title company. And then proceeds after closing costs are wired back to John and Jay's SEP IRA. So again, I'm going to stress again that it's important to understand the money did not come out of the SEP IRA, go to John and Jay, and then John and Jay make the investment. This is John and Jay's SEP IRA as their own entities making the investment. So let's take a look at the numbers. The initial investment was $125,000, which had a positive cash flow over 26 months of $425 each going to the SEP IRAs. This means $11,000 in net rental proceeds. The gains from the sale of the property was $62,500, which means total proceeds after sale is $198,550. That is a profit of $73,550 going back tax deferred over a 26-month period. 59% return for 26 months. It's not a bad deal. Not a bad deal at all. But so what are some key points to take away from this? The first one is that John and Jay's IRAs will pay no taxes on the return from that investment, right? Like we said before, normally this is where a 1031 would come in. You would get the proceeds from that sale. You try to 1031 them to defer the taxes later. But because of the nature of this account, those funds are coming back tax deferred to be reinvested in full. Now, if they were in an account like a Roth or the Roth portion of a 401k or like a Coverdell ESA or an HSA, those funds wouldn't be coming back tax deferred. They would be coming back entirely tax free to either be distributed down the line or to be reinvested into the next property. Keep in mind that John and Jay were in total control of the process from the very beginning to the very end. When they first purchased the property, they moved over an additional $50,000 because they felt that they needed it to do the rehab on the building. They wanted to spruce it up and make it look nice for the tenant that they were going to be putting in there. But when they found the tenant wanted to pay a little bit of a lower rent, and in exchange offered to do all of the rehab themselves. So this meant that John and Jay had to get together. They sat down and really considered their options. At no point were they forced to make any move because they had full control of the entire situation. And so when they found a favorable agreement, they signed it and they gave the tenant a little bit lower rent so that they can do all the rehab themselves, keeping that cash in their retirement account and maximizing the return that they were going to get for this property. Now, one more time, John and Jay did not take the funds out of the IRA, invest it, and then return it back to the IRA. They simply bought it and then later sold it for a profit, all within the SEP IRA. But keep in mind that they didn't have to borrow funds because they were allowed to partner. All right, I know sometimes you can feel like, well, I don't really have much in my IRA. I don't think there's really much that I can do at all when it comes to real estate investments. That's not true. That's why the saying your network is your net worth is so key here. If you have someone who has funds, even if it's outside of an IRA, your IRA can partner with that person so that no borrowed funds are made, or no borrowed funds are used for the investment, and you get to purchase it outright. Now, whenever you are partnering, it's important to understand that all expenses and profits need to be split according to the percentage ownership. All right. Now, that doesn't just mean that, okay, well, we split 50-50 on the titles, but I'll be the cash one and then someone else can be the sweat equity partner. All right. So I'll put up all the cash since I've got it in my IRA, and then they can handle the rest. No, every dollar coming out needs to be split. Every dollar coming in needs to be split according to those ownership percentages. Also, keep in mind that John and Jay could have had the checks deposited directly into their account. They could have had the checks deposited directly into their account instead of going through the property management company. This obviously would require a little bit more work, but it's important to understand the line that we're drawing here between extending a service and being a fiduciary for the IRA. Now, could they have gone out and mowed the lawn? Could they have gone out and done construction on the work themselves? Absolutely not. Because in that case, what they're doing is they're providing a service that the IRA would otherwise have to pay for. Now, when it comes to just simply keeping track of the funds coming in, well, the IRA can't do that either. So that's just acting as a fiduciary, right? You, as someone, you don't have to pay for a management company. You can just do this yourself. So the IRA can also do so with you acting as a fiduciary and keeping track of those funds coming in, communicating with the tenants and stuff like that. So if there's anything that you guys want to really take a deep dive in, check out our online classes, Buying Real Estate and IRAs, the Sticky Situations and How to Solve Them. What that'll do is it'll let you take a deeper dive into some situations that are more nuanced, right? And how people when they encountered those problems, as well as how they overcame those problems. Now, I mean, that's a bit of a favor from you guys. Being newer on the IRA specialist team, I'm trying to grow my clientele, and this is going to be the first time I'm getting an opportunity to teach a class myself. And so I'd like to ask for you guys to reach out to me. Let me know how I did. Let me know if this was something you were interested in. And let me know if there's any improvements or any other topics that you guys would like to cover. All right, because I promise you that you have more value in your retirement account than you realize. All right, guys. So now I'm going to open up the floor to any questions that we have. I just want to check the chat.
Yeah, we did get a couple of questions. JCATX787 asked, is an aunt or an uncle, are they not prohibited?
So they're not, right? So whenever we're thinking about those prohibited parties, remember, we're going directly up the family tree and directly down the family tree. The reason has to deal with what's considered the flow of inheritance, right? As much as I love my sisters, or I love my sisters to death, when I kick the bucket, I'm not passing them my wealth. I'm more than likely going to pass it on to a spouse or to a child when the time comes, right? So because the IRS knows that's generally the flow of inheritance, it says, well, those people can't be allowed to earn money for the IRA or help the IRA out in growing funds, because what they're really doing is investing into an account that they're going to eventually inherit. Now, that same rule wouldn't apply to aunts or uncles, because generally speaking, they're probably not going to get your inheritance. So that's why those people are not prohibited, even though they are related to the account holder.
Awesome. That was a great answer. Another question we had, can Roth funds be transferred to an HSA?
Unfortunately, no, right? Because that HSA is what's called, like I said, the best of both worlds, tax deductible contributions plus tax-free distributions going toward qualified medical expenses. It's really hard to get funds that are not just simply contributions into that HSA. So you couldn't take the Roth funds that are sitting post-tax and move them over to a pre-tax account, essentially recharacterizing them, right? Because it would just essentially be a headache for the IRS. So they don't want to deal with it. So they really restrict you from putting any funds from that Roth IRA over to the HSA.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that one. Looks like that's all that we have from online. Yep, that's all we've got online.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, please reach out. Let me know if there's any other questions, whether you have any critiques about the presentation or some future topics that you really want to cover when it comes to your self-directed IRA or really an IRA in general. If you have any questions at all, give us a call, reach out to me. You've got my email there. Ask to speak to either me or any one of the IRA specialists, and we'd be happy to help you out. Until then, you guys have a good day.